and welcome to this month's edition of To Talk. This month we'd like to discuss an issue that is receiving a great deal of attention in Cobb as well as communities across the nation, and that's elder abuse. In an effort to address this issue, a cross-section of Cobb's community leaders have joined forces to establish the Cobb Elder Abuse Task Force. Joining me today is Barry Morgan and Jason Marbutt. And Barry is the Cobb County Solicitor General for the state court. Barry has been an assistant district attorney, chief assistant solicitor general, and since his appointment by Governor Zell Miller has served as solicitor general, having been elected 5 times. Welcome, Barry.
Thank you. Jason
Marbutt prosecutes the elder abuse cases for the district attorney's office. Welcome, Jason.
Nice to be here.
Driving forces behind the successful 2014 prosecution of an unlicensed personal care home, Jason, I know that was your case. So the case prompted the legislature to change the law regarding punishment of such offenses. So let's begin by talking about the issue of elder abuse and that case.
Sure. It began as an unlicensed personal care home investigation. What unfortunately you had was the defendants had elderly and disabled women who were packed into a basement. They had makeshift rooms made with plywood, and they were essentially multiple people to a room, very unsanitary and unsafe conditions.
Now, just as bad as that sounds, let's talk a little bit about the safeguards that the county does have in place relative to personal care and assisted living facilities. What are some of the things that the county requires for these to be legal?
Well, there's licensing. I mean, is one of the biggest things, and that's a statewide licensure. There's healthcare facilities regulation. For the county, I think that they've worked through the commissioners.
Right, well, they have to come through the commissioners. I mean, and depending on the square footage of a home, you have to have a certain amount of square footage, and you're limited to 4 unrelated adults. And then as you go above that number, of course, you have to get permission from the county. So, yeah, the second part of that licensing, as you mentioned, is that the county has to approve the use of the facility, which then, of course, you get into the square footage, and you get into, is there parking, are there employees that are going to be living on the property, and things like that. So let's talk about this particular case because, I mean, there was a lot of really egregious conditions.
Right, and no one would have known about it but for one of the residents complained, and their solution, the homeowners and our defendants, their solution was to drop her off at the hospital to where she made a complaint, and then the police and code enforcement and HFR were sent out to investigate. By the time search warrants were obtained and actually went into the house, the defendants jettisoned the people all over the city, all over metro area, and there became a bolo, a be on the lookout, looking for these potential residents.
Right, these folks that had pretty much been deposited in here. Now, Barry, I know you and I have gone to some of these elder abuse task force meetings. It's a pretty big group of people.
It is.
So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about how the Elder Abuse Task Force came about?
Well, the genesis was through the Neighborhood Safety Commission and some very concerned citizens about the way elder folks were being treated in our community. Got together, came to the district attorney, Pat Head at the time, and myself, and since Vic Reynolds has been very involved. We both serve on that Elder Abuse Task Force. He is chair and I as vice chair. And it's a collaboration of a lot of different entities. We have the support of almost every mayor in Cobb County, the police forces, Cobb County Police Force, all of our municipal police forces are all involved. And we get together to look at the issues. So the focus is really multi-task.
Because there's more than just, I mean, Jason has kind of described one type of elder abuse.
Sure.
But there's actually a couple different kinds, aren't there?
Sure. There's, it can be a misdemeanor, it can be a felony crime that comes out of contact with a person who's abusing an elderly individual.
Well, because like we have financial,
right?
And I think this other case that we're going to talk about kind of goes along with the financial aspects.
Right.
But then there's also, I mean, what was really surprising to me, and Jason, you may be able to talk a little bit about this, was that you actually have family members that can be abusive, and it doesn't just have to be another business.
That's right. And in fact, the 3 types of elder abuse that we normally talk about, A-N-E, there's abuse, neglect, and exploitation. So abuse it would be sexual abuse, it could be physical abuse, it could be deprivation of essential services. The neglect has some of the same components of that deprivation of essential services if it's knowing and willful by a caretaker. And that's, I think, particularly something that we see with family members. Sometimes the excuse that's given is it's caregiver stress, but the difference, of course, for true neglect, criminal neglect, is they're picking on somebody in a vulnerable position.
Right.
And then exploitation is the financial component. We had that recent case. There was a conviction.
Right. We just had one that there was just a conviction and dealt with some property on Johns Ferry Road. And I mean, the property is kind of what I think most people in the local community know about.
Right.
But it was really, it was almost a combination of a couple of the different elder abuse.
Absolutely. And the sentencing is tomorrow, so we'll have to, I guess, stay tuned for what the actual full result is. But there was a returned verdict of guilty to two gentlemen, Joseph Carr. I'm blanking on the other Carr, but there was a father
and son, right?
And Miss Perkins was the victim. She was in her 90s, was suffering from dementia and some family members. Her daughter got hooked in with the Carrs, and the Carrs became power of attorney, and through their role as power of attorney, were convicted of, I think, taking something like $4.1 million.
Right, it was over $4 million that they basically took away from Mrs. Perkins.
That's right.
And, you know, through various fees and other things. But I think one of the things, and Barry, you probably want to talk a little bit about this, but one of the things that I noticed in going to some of these elder abuse task force is that in some ways, the folks that get abused, the elder folks, if it's not a neglect where they're put into a facility, there's a lot of trust. You know, someone comes up and they do a really good job of selling their services, and then that's kind of when they get hooked in. So what would be some of the advice that you would give based on some of the cases you've seen, you know, for the older or the elder folks in the audience and maybe watching, the things to watch out for? I mean, you know, we always hear that if somebody's offering something for free, that it's nothing ever comes free.
Right.
But what are some of the things that you've seen?
I think one of the things, and what I dealt with my father before he passed away, is to never be pressured into any situation.
Right. It doesn't have to be done today.
It doesn't have to be done today. If you can't step back and look at it, then it's probably a situation where someone's going to try to take advantage of you. Fortunately for him, he would always say, "You need to talk to my son."
Yeah, well, that of course helps a lot. Yes.
We don't always have that. You know, if a situation sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Right.
And I think the other piece of advice I would have for our elder citizens is don't be afraid to speak out about something that's happening. I know that in many of these situations they're embarrassed by, you know, that a family member would be treating them this way.
Right, they can't possibly imagine that their son or daughter or some relative would not have their best interests at heart.
Right, but
and
speak
there's
out.
So many times that's exactly what we see.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Now there is a number that folks can call, and that'll be at the bottom of the screen as we're going through the you know, various segments on today's show. So, well, I'd like to thank both of you for joining us today. After a brief break, we will continue with our show and our discussion about elder abuse. We'll be right back.
Welcome home, man.
Mom, can I have $1? I think my purse is upstairs on the bed. finding ways to keep kids active and healthy. Get ideas, get involved, get going at letsmove.gov.
My sadness and depression grew out of giving myself to my career before I would give myself to myself. And then I am out there speaking in front of thousands of people with a smile pasted on my face, but dying on the inside. Hiding sadness makes you more and more sad because it closes you off. Being able to talk about it is so liberating. Giving voice to what you're feeling is part of the healing.
Hi, I'm Terry Williams. Can I tell you that it is way past time for us to come face to face with the issue of mental illness in the Black community? Time for us to stop hiding it behind closed doors. Share ourselves. Healing starts with us.
Welcome back to Talk. Our next two guests are Marietta Police Chief Dan Flynn and the Director of the Cobb Senior Services, Jessica Gill. Chief Flynn was appointed police chief in January of 2007. He has an extensive career in law enforcement, having risen to major in the Miami-Dade Police Department, chief of Savannah Police Department, and chief of Savannah-Chatham Metropolitan Police Department. Chief Flynn is a graduate of the FBI National Academy and Senior Management Institute for Police. He was inducted into the prestigious International Evidence-Based Police Hall of Fame. Jessica Gill manages 8 county facilities and all county programs and services for those 55 and over, and sits on the Cobb County Elder Abuse Task Force. Welcome to the two of you.
Thank you.
Now, Jessica, you are in charge of senior services.
Yes.
And this whole segment today has been about elder abuse. So why don't you talk a little bit about what you see? You know, there's a lot of vulnerabilities that, you know, what I've seen with this whole elder abuse is that people kind of play on the vulnerabilities of seniors. So let's talk a little bit about what you see.
Sure. Well, we're seeing a lot more with chronic disease, and dementia and depression fall into chronic disease. And when you're dealing with dementia or you're depressed, you tend to rely on others to help take care of you. And so what happens is they trust. The seniors trust folks who may not necessarily be the ones they should trust. And
of course, you know, the biggest one, we talked a little bit about it in the last segment, was about financial trust.
Yes.
And that is, of course, the easiest one for the elder abusers to take advantage of. Now, Dan, you've got a pretty extensive career, and I'm sure in some of the other areas that you worked that you saw elder abuse, but this whole elder abuse task force is kind of a new thing in Cobb. Sure. Now, I know that even in the city of Marietta, because there's good cooperation between Marietta and Cobb, you've seen some cases of abuse.
Sure. You know, I think elder abuse occurs everywhere, and it certainly has occurred every place that I've worked in my career. But I think what's different here is the Cobb Elder Abuse Task Force is really draws more public attention to it, and you know, when we the police notice that the public is really watching or focused on something more, we tend to do a better job. Yeah, not really just the police, but all of the criminal justice.
Well, it kind of brings it to everybody's attention. I mean, because a lot of times, you know, crime, you don't really know something's happening until somebody tells you about it, right?
Yes. And,
so let's talk a little bit about, you know, I know we had one case we were talking about during the break.
Sure. Well, the case, I know we've talked about some of the institutional cases. We've had those, and certainly the physical abuse cases, which are always very sad and graphic to talk about, but we deal with them. But really, obviously, the most prevalent kind is usually financial abuse. That happens far more than any other kind, and it's usually coupled with other kinds. The one case that we were talking about be the Joya Summers case, and in that case, there were 2 visiting nurses from a program checking on elderly patients, and they checked on a woman and found her at the address that they had. Found her, she was being kept in a garage that was not heated or air conditioned. In this case, it was in the summertime, it was very hot, and not air conditioned, it was sweltering hot. She was in bad condition, and the nurses were kind of appalled at what they found, and took her actually to a McDonald's and called the police. When we responded, we found a victim in bad physical condition. She had several complaints, and took care of that case, and ultimately charged the person running the house where she was being kept with an unlicensed care home.
Okay. So now, you know, the three different cases that, you know, we've kind of showcased here for the audience. You know, the financial one, of course, there was a transaction, so that kind of brought a lot of that to light. And the other case where we had the unlicensed caregiver, and there were all the people that were moved around, that was a kind of a neighbor who said something didn't look right. Now, in the case we just talked about, how besides the nurses now, were they not coming there on a regular basis, or?
No, that was the first time at that location, and they just showed up, and they spotted conditions that they knew were below standard.
Well, had they been alerted by neighbors, family members, or what prompted them to come to that location?
It was a regular visitation, but they acted on something that first responders don't always pick up on first time. It's one of the things we work on with the task force. Is they spotted conditions. They realized that you know, the sanitary conditions and physical conditions were bad, and that the condition of the elderly person was bad, and you know, were conditions that come from neglect.
Okay, now Jessica, over at the Senior Services, you don't really, you know, a lot of times, you know, folks hear stories about child abuse. A lot of times it's picked up by the teacher, or you know, when they go on a doctor's visit. Unfortunately, with the folks that come to Senior Services, those aren't really the ones that we're going to have issues with elder abuse, are they?
Well, it depends.
Okay.
Oftentimes we'll get calls where we just sense something's not right, and my staff, they're trained to be able to pick up on some of those things.
So, but now that is like a call from either another caregiver or a family member?
We've actually had people call and say, I need help, and then hang up.
Okay.
And so we've had to try to trace back and see if we can find out what the problem is. But it's a lot of questions because, again, these individuals aren't used to talking about things that don't want to air their dirty laundry.
Sure.
And so we really have to be in tune with what they're saying to us. But we've gotten so good at it, and there are more cases than you'd ever realize. Oh,
and that's one of the reasons that we're doing this segment on the show, is for you know, folks out there that, you know, that they start looking for things that may not be right. And you know, in a lot of ways, it's you know, you hear about abuse in marriages and things like that, and the person who's being abused almost gets used to it and doesn't see it as a problem. And my concern, I think all of our concern, is that that's what's happening with elder abuse especially. So now, both of you are members of the task force, and I know in the previous segment we talked a little bit about some of the other members of the task force, but what I'd like each of you to do is kind of talk about some of the parts of the task force as to how it kind of really helps you reach out, you know, to kind of get, you know, kind of get to the root of this.
I can start by talking about, referring to a previous case that you've reviewed, and we were talking about how do these cases come to the attention, and the case I'm thinking about, the Raquel Penny case, well-known case. And the way that case started was an elderly woman was dropped off at Kennestone Hospital at the emergency room there, and she was in bad shape and physical shape, and she was telling about the place that she had been brought in from and terrible conditions that were existing there. The hospital staff did a wonderful job. They listened to her, and past everything else they listened, and they contacted the state. And we learned the state Adult Protective Services and Healthcare Facilities Regulation is another state agency. They called them, and they came and investigated the woman's complaint and found it to be found. Then they brought the police in. And I think the message there for us is that we have good and willing partners from the state, from the county, and local municipalities. There are folks that will, if it's properly recognized, we have a lot of resources to use to rectify these problems.
And that's one of the things about the Elder Abuse Task Force, and we touched briefly on it on the first segment, is that it's a huge group of agencies that have come together. Yeah. You know, the meeting that I went to, you know, I want to say it could be as high as 25 or 30 different agencies, state, county, local. that are all coming together to just kind of establish that exchange of information.
Sure. Even legislators.
That's true. So now, what are some of the, in the Elder Abuse Task Force, what are some of the agencies that you work directly with that, if folks want to reach out to you or to some of these other agencies to report potential abuse?
Sure. I think in the case of the task force, we really serve at Cobb Senior Services as the community resource. Okay. So what happens is oftentimes these people have to find a place to live. They need to find certain types of care. They may need visiting nurses coming in. And we're the ones that we help to create that. We make the plan. We put together how we're going to help those people access those services.
Okay. Now, I know that we talked about, in the first segment, we talked about the fact that there is an 800 number, but also, the bottom line is, as with any case of illegal activity or something that people in the community think is wrong, they should call 911. Because the 911 operators also know about the Elder Abuse Task Force.
Yeah, the standard is you call 911 for emergencies, but in some cases, people suspect it. They'll see a neighbor or someone that they know or someone that they've heard of, and they'll suspect elder abuse, and but they don't really know. They're skittish about it. And what we from the task force, we tell them, if you have any question at all about the care or treatment of elderly people, call. We have a tips line, and call the tip line, and you can call a non-emergency number, but you just have to let someone know, and don't.
Right, and now both those numbers, as we're talking, the tip line and the non-emergency number are on the bottom of the screen, so folks can call that number, as you said, if they're just not sure, to get some questions answered. And the person on the other end may ask them some questions about what they see, and kind of similar to what we talked about.
And protect their identity if they want to remain anonymous. We want the information to investigate, and it's not important to us to know who called. It's more important to get the information. And
sure, because sometimes that is our only way of finding out that there's a potential problem. Yes. Well, I want to thank both of you for joining us on To Talk. It's definitely a serious thing that it's good to see that the county and the local municipalities and the state and all that have come together to try to help protect our elders. Great. Well, as you mentioned, the tip line and the non-emergency number was located on the bottom of the screen, and we'll put it back up on the screen. That's all for today's show. I hope you found it interesting, and we'll see you next time.
The Cobb County Safety Village is the most comprehensive safety training environment in the region. Located in central Cobb County, the Safety Village aims to provide the highest quality of safety education available. Primarily designed for elementary-age school children, the Safety Village provides hands-on life safety training. Education is the key to reducing risk and protecting our community and its residents, and the Cobb County Safety Village is the first in Georgia to offer this kind of learning experience. On the 8-acre site is a large multi-use education building which includes classrooms, a cafeteria, offices for employees, and an auditorium made to look like the historic Strand Theater in Marietta. There is also a station for inspecting car seat installation, a free service provided to the residents of the county by Safe Kids of Cobb County, which includes 3 mechanics bays that provide shelter from the elements as well as heat during the winter months, as opposed to before when seat checks were done outside. After walking through the reception area, visitors are greeted with what looks like a small house. This is known as Sparky's house. In the hallway, which is made to look like a street, there is a replica of a telephone booth and a small tree. Sparky's house actually consists of a living room, bedroom, and kitchen, creating an incredibly memorable learning experience that mimics some life-threatening situations that children may face in their own homes. The front door of the house opens to what looks like a regular home on the inside. In Sparky's living room, children are taught about the 3 elements of fire, shown what objects around the house are more subject to catching on fire, and then the home fills with smoke from machines and steam heats the doorknob at the exit. Children must then maneuver, crawling across the floor to keep away from the smoke, and feel the door with the back of their hands to see if there is fire on the other side. The children then open the door and crawl outside to safety. When they are in Sparky's bedroom and the room fills with smoke, the children must then climb out the window with a safety ladder and meet up at the family's arranged meeting spot, the tree outside of the house. After these lessons, children participate in a simulated 911 call, complete with a live operator answering at the other end. Children are also given classes from police officers regarding topics ranging from what to do if approached by a stranger, what to do when you're home alone and hear a knock at the door, and what to do if they find a gun in the house. Interaction and participation by the children is highly encouraged and also provides for a better learning experience. The Safety Village's goal is exactly this: teach children in a unique and unforgettable way and make it as interactive as possible, but do so in a manner that is controlled, supervised, and above all, safe for the students. The David Hankerson Education Building is only the first part of the children's experience. The Safety Village itself is a working village. The land has been paved like a small neighborhood and designed to look just like that, only on a reduced scale. The Safety Village is a child-sized representation of our county, complete with real trees, scaled-down operative buildings with signage, small street signs and traffic lights, and even model homes. Site elements used throughout the village reference those found around the Marietta Square to help give the scene a recognizable and authentic look. The site features 4 distinct areas, which are the Marietta Square, a commercial district, a residential district, and an industrial district. Since it has opened, the Cobb County Safety Village has improved the fire department's efficiency in training students by 200%. Twice as many students have been able to take part in this safety training than last year before the Safety Village opened. It is easier and requires less manpower to have a centralized location, which helps to reduce scheduling conflicts. Before, when 2nd and 4th graders participated in their state-mandated fire safety program, a fire truck with a trailer housing a far less advanced scenario similar to Sparky's house would have to travel out to each school individually and could only handle one small group of students at a time. The Cobb County Safety Village allowed them to build a more complex scenario, which teaches the children more effectively, and they have room for multiple classes at one time. Children will benefit greatly from the knowledge that they will encounter through observation and participation. Learning is essential to a child's mind, and taking part in the process is crucial. The philosophy is simple: tell me and I will forget, show me and I may remember, involve me and I will understand.
Each year, our children are put at risk by drivers who ignore bus stop arms and warning lights. In Cobb County alone, more than 1,000 drivers ignore them every day. The Cobb Police Department and Cobb schools have partnered with Operation Stop Arm to educate drivers about the new law to save lives.
Tragically, a young child was killed at a bus stop by a passing car in 2009.
While we were being interviewed by the news crew, a driver ran through the stop arm of the bus.
We had just installed new stop arm cameras on some of our buses and were able to hand the photo over to law enforcement. And now, with the new law, hopefully we will reduce violations of the stop arm law and have additional evidence to cite violators.
Drivers who pass a school bus with a stop arm activated can receive up to a $1,000 fine from the court and get 6 points tacked onto their driver's history. It is a serious offense.
So next time you're in a hurry and you're tempted to pass a stopped school bus,